When I did it, well, I think, in a way, I was aware of it because...
This is Maggie Smith's last moment, and it lands like a quiet bell in the chest, a soft note that keeps ringing long after the room goes still, because when a presence like hers slips from the stage, you feel the air change. You feel the weight of a lifetime of sharp wit and steel-spined elegance settle across your shoulders, and you just sit there for a second thinking, wow, how did one woman manage to be the strict professor everyone wished they'd had, the grand dowager who could slice a room in half with a single glance, and the tender, complicated soul behind all that armor, all at once. And as I breathe through it, mate, I can't help seeing flickers of her across decades, the theater lights, the Oscar nights, the crisp BBC sets, the bustle of big film crews, the careful hush before a take, and then that voice, clipped but warm, finding the exact note every time. And it's strange, isn't it? The way certain performances attach themselves to you, how a line from a period drama carries into your regular Tuesday, how a quiet look from a schoolmistress in a tartan classroom from another century still straightens your spine here in the present. And I think that's the bit that gets me. Because under the polished timing and the famous one-liners, there was this relentless craft, a worker at the bench, choosing, trimming, breathing, giving just enough and never more, like a master carpenter who knows when to leave the grain alone. So tonight we're not just rolling highlights, we're going back to the workshop, to the sweat and the nerves and the tiny decisions that make a character live, and we're going to trace the long road from a fierce young stage actor building a name, to the double Oscar film star, to the late career icon who made younger audiences sit up and go, right, that's what screen presence feels like. And if this finds you missing her a little, same here. Take your time, have a cuppa, and if her work ever steadied you in a messy year or gave you a laugh when you needed one, you're in the right place. Because this isn't a cold list, it's a conversation. And if you're new around here, you're welcome to stick around. Leave a memory in the comments. Maybe subscribe if this kind of deep dive feels like home. Now let's open the door to where it all started. The rooms, the voices, the era that shaped a legend, and follow the thread to the moment the world learned what craft can do. She was born in Ilford, East London, in 1934. Just a regular post-war kid with a quick tongue and eyes that seemed to see through you. The family didn't have much, but they had stories, and Maggie soaked them up like air. There's something about growing up in a house where laughter is the shield against uncertainty. It sharpens you, makes you listen harder, makes you find rhythm in every word. She carried that rhythm all her life. When she talked about those early years, there was no glamour in it, just grit, a little sarcasm, and that dry British humor that would one day become her signature. She went to Oxford High School, and it was there, on a makeshift stage, that the first spark caught. She wasn't trying to be famous. She was trying to feel something real. Acting, for her, wasn't about applause. It was about presence. By the time she was in her 20s, Shed already joined the Oxford Playhouse, trading sleep for rehearsals, earning every small laugh and gasp from the audience. That's where people started whispering, "There's something about her." And they were right. Maggie had that rare stillness. She didn't need to move much to command a room. One look, one breath, and you were locked in. It's what made directors fall over themselves to cast her, even when she was still learning what kind of performer she wanted to be. In the 50 seconds, British theatre was booming with restless energy. Laurence Olivier, John Gielgud, Richard Burton, giants everywhere. And into that mix walked Maggie, this sharp, unflappable woman who could match any of them, line for line, gesture for gesture. She joined the National Theatre Company, and that was it. Her craft found its playground. People talk about her being intimidating, but that wasn't quite right. She was precise. She believed in truth over pretense, in making the words land exactly where they should. When she worked opposite Olivier in Othello in 1965, she wasn't the ingenue standing beside a legend. She was Desdemona with a heartbeat, a human caught between love and fear. That performance would carry her straight into the film world. And soon, Hollywood came knocking. Now, the late 60 seconds were a golden window. She took on the prime of Miss Jean Brodie, a role that could have easily been too much for a lesser actor. But she played it like she'd lived it. Fierce, flawed, tender beneath the steel. That film changed everything. The Oscar came in 1970, and suddenly Maggie Smith wasn't just a theater name, she was a global one. Yet, even then, she kept her distance from the chaos of fame. No big parties, no press chasing. She went back to work. Always work. She said once that she didn't know what to do when she wasn't acting. It was her way of understanding the world. Through the 70 seconds and 80 seconds, she moved between screen and stage, gathering another Oscar, a BAFTA, Emmys, countless nominations, but what she gathered most was respect. Colleagues called her a quiet storm, gentle off camera, unstoppable when the red light blinked on. Behind that regal face was a fighter, pushing through health scares, personal heartbreaks, the grind of long runs and endless takes, but you'd never see it on her face. That's the thing, she didn't perform her struggle. She transformed it into art. There's a reason audiences connected to her so deeply. It wasn't just the lines she delivered. It was the silence between them. When she paused, you leaned in. When she raised an eyebrow, you laughed before the punchline even landed. And as the decades rolled by, she became that rare bridge between generations. Our parents' favorite actress, and our own secret comfort on late nights with Downton Abbey or Harry Potter. Each era had its Maggie Smith, and somehow they were all her. That's where the theme of this story begins to take shape. A woman who never chased the spotlight, but became its center anyway. She didn't bend to the noise of fame. She made the world come to her pace. Slow, deliberate, brilliant. In a business obsessed with reinvention, she stayed absolutely herself, and that, in the end, became her greatest role. By the time the 1,990 seconds arrived, Maggie Smith had already achieved what most actors only dream of: awards, acclaim, a permanent place in cinematic history. But she wasn't done, not even close. What made her remarkable wasn't just talent, it was endurance. She carried the discipline of theater into everything she did, no matter how big the cameras or how tight the schedules. While others burned out chasing trends, Maggie just kept refining her craft, moving like someone who had nothing to prove and everything to express. Her roles grew deeper, sharper. In A Room with a View and Gosford Park, she wasn't playing characters so much as human contradictions. Brittle, proud, funny, vulnerable. She had this uncanny way of showing strength without arrogance, pain without pity. You didn't watch her, you believed her. Then came the era that would make her a household name to a whole new generation: Harry Potter. It's funny how things circle back. After decades of serious drama, Shakespeare, and stage triumphs, she became known to millions as Professor Minerva McGonagall, stern, brilliant, quietly kind. Kids adored her, parents respected her, and critics marveled at how naturally she slipped into that world of spells and castles. But behind that wand and sharp wit was the same Maggie who'd been perfecting her timing since the 1,950 seconds. Every pause, every look over her spectacles, carried weight. She never overdid it. She trusted the audience to feel what wasn't said. That's the secret most actors never learn: less is more when the emotion is real. Around the same time, she found another late career triumph in Downton Abbey, as Violet Crawley, the Dowager Countess of Grantham. That role, mate, it was pure Maggie. Regal yet mischievous, old school yet sharp as ever. She turned one-liners into daggers, softened only by her charm. Every scene with her was an event. There was this moment where she sat in a drawing room, teacup in hand, delivering some devastating remark with perfect calm, and the entire audience at home just grinned. You didn't even need to understand the full context, her delivery was music. Julian Fellowes, the show's creator, said once that no one else could have done it. He was right. Violet Crawley wasn't written, she was lived. Every glance and sigh grounded in years of Maggie's instinct. Still, What most people didn't see was how hard it all was. During Harry Potter, she battled serious health problems but refused to let it stop her. She kept filming, often arriving early, staying late, never making a fuss. When asked later why she didn't rest, she said something simple: because that's what we do. That quiet dedication, that old-fashioned professionalism, became her way of honoring the craft. Even when she was exhausted, she gave everything. Watching her on screen during that time, you'd never guess the strain. There was dignity in every frame, grace that didn't need to announce itself. And yet, despite the acclaim, she never seemed comfortable with the celebrity part. She avoided premieres, declined most interviews, and didn't even watch Downton Abbey. On the Graham Norton show, when they asked if she'd seen it, she just laughed and said, "No, I haven't. I can't stand watching myself." That's the honesty of someone who doesn't chase admiration. She didn't need it. Her joy was in the work, the rehearsal room, the rehearsal smell of old wood and dust, not the red carpet. Maybe that's why people loved her even more. She never acted like a star. She acted like an artist who still had questions to answer. What's striking, looking back, is how seamlessly she moved between eras, from black and white stage productions to high-definition cinema. She never lost that instinct for truth. Watch her face in The Lady in the Van, 2015, and you see decades of experience condensed into every twitch, every blink. It's a masterclass in stillness. The film's director once said she didn't just perform, she inhabited. That word fits her perfectly: inhabited. Every role became a home she built from the inside out. And when she finally stepped out of it, she left the lights on for us to look around. There's a lovely symmetry in her career. 2 Oscars, 2 BAFTAs, countless Emmys, but the real achievement wasn't the hardware. It was the consistency. 60+ years without ever losing the thread, she gave the same care to a supporting role in a student film as she did to an Oscar-winning performance. That's rare. That's integrity. In an age where actors chase fame on social media, Maggie's silence became her statement. Her mystery was magnetic. You wanted to know what she thought, how she felt, but she only ever let the work speak, and that work built a bridge. Young women saw in her the power of restraint, the beauty of intelligence over spectacle. Older audiences saw the endurance of an artist who didn't fade with time. She deepened. She showed that aging wasn't the end of relevance, it was the beginning of wisdom. And for anyone who's ever struggled to hold their place in a noisy world, that was quietly revolutionary. So when we talk about Maggie Smith in this chapter, it's not just about her performances, it's about her defiance. She showed that you could be soft-spoken and still shake the world. That you could keep your private life private and still move millions. And that maybe the greatest power lies not in shouting the loudest, but in choosing exactly when to speak. That's the kind of legacy that doesn't dim. It just keeps echoing. There's a side of Maggie Smith the public never really saw, and maybe that's the way she wanted it. For all her fame, she was a deeply private woman, a contradiction wrapped in quiet elegance. People thought they knew her because of the roles, the sharp-tongued dowager, the wise professor, the unshakable matriarch, but behind those layers, there was a softness she rarely allowed the world to glimpse. She once said that acting gave her a way to hide in plain sight. That's what made her so fascinating. She poured herself into the work, yet somehow managed to keep her real self untouched by it. You could watch her for decades and still not quite know who Maggie Smith truly was, and maybe that was her greatest magic. But behind that composure, life wasn't always kind. In the early 2000s, she went through a tough fight with illness, one that could have ended her career right there. Doctors urged her to rest, to step back, but she didn't. During the filming of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, she was in the middle of treatment and still showed up on set. Her colleagues later spoke about how incredible it was. She'd finish a scene with flawless delivery, step away quietly, and only then let the exhaustion show. That's what real courage looks like. Not grand speeches or heroic gestures, but persistence in the quiet moments, when no one's watching. She never wanted sympathy, never wanted to be treated differently. It was always about the work. And when she finally recovered, she went straight back to stage plays, as if nothing had happened. That resilience, that absolute devotion, became part of her legend. Still, the toll of decades in the spotlight can't be denied. Fame, for her, was never comfortable. She once described it as a nuisance that follows you everywhere. She didn't crave interviews or attention. She avoided red carpets and rarely gave personal details. Even her friends said she had a steel curtain around her private life. But within that circle, she was funny, generous, sometimes self-deprecating. Judi Dench once joked that Maggie was terribly serious until you make her laugh, and then she can't stop. That's the thing, the woman who could make an audience cry with a single tear also loved silly jokes, crossword puzzles, and long, quiet afternoons at home. She wasn't just the queen of theater. She was a human being who valued normalcy in a world that constantly tried to turn her into an icon. The deeper truth, though, is that her brilliance came at a price. Every performance cost her something. She gave pieces of herself to each role: the intellect of Brody, the vulnerability of Desdemona, the heartbreak of Jean Travers in The Lonely Passion of Judith Hearn. And when the cameras stopped rolling, those pieces stayed out there, scattered across time. It's easy to see the glamour and forget the loneliness that comes with a life spent embodying other people. Maggie once admitted she found it hard to separate herself from her characters, that sometimes after a play ended, she didn't quite know who she was for a while. That sense of displacement, of living between fiction and truth, is something only actors at her level understand. When she entered her later years, the world began to realize just how rare she was. In an industry chasing youth, she stood tall, wrinkles, silver hair, sharp tongue and all, and never apologized for it. She didn't chase reinvention. She embodied evolution. The Maggie Smith of her 80s still carried the same fire as the one in her 20s, only tempered by wisdom. She said once that aging was infuriating but also liberating, and maybe that's why audiences connected with her right to the end. There was honesty in the way she aged, unfiltered, unapologetic. She didn't try to mask it with perfection. She let the years show, and that made her even more powerful. In her final years, she quietly stepped back from acting. No big farewell tour, no grand announcement, just a slow fading from public life. She preferred it that way. Gentle, dignified, leaving before the applause faded. Friends said she spent more time with her family, reading, tending her garden, watching the world from a peaceful distance. She was content, it seemed. And yet, when the news came that she was gone, it hit harder than expected. Maybe because it felt like the end of an era, a kind of silence you can't fill. For 6 decades, she'd been part of the cultural heartbeat, every line, every look etched into memory. Losing that presence was like watching a lighthouse go dark. But even in that silence, she left behind a conversation about craft, about dignity, about the kind of artistry that doesn't fade with time. She showed that you don't have to bare your soul publicly to make people feel deeply. You can be reserved and still be revolutionary. She proved that the old-school values of discipline, respect, and subtlety still matter in a world obsessed with noise. That's the hidden truth behind Maggie Smith's legacy. She didn't just play characters. She reminded us of what endurance, integrity, and quiet strength really look like. And now, when you see her in Downton Abbey reruns, or in that familiar classroom at Hogwarts, you notice things you might have missed before: the small tremor of emotion behind a line, the weight of a lifetime in one pause, the flicker of mischief in her eyes. She left those moments behind for us, like little treasures, scattered through her work. You can watch them anytime, and she's there again, alive in every frame. Maybe that's the real kind of immortality. An artist like her earns not in headlines or statues, but in the quiet places where people remember her and smile. When I think about what Maggie Smith really stood for, it goes beyond film and theater. It's about craft, discipline, and that very British sense of grace under pressure. She didn't just act. She elevated acting into something spiritual. She turned words into music, silence into emotion. Watching her work was like watching a painter who doesn't rush a single stroke. And that's the bit our channel keeps coming back to: what separates the good from the unforgettable. Maggie's story is proof that greatness doesn't need noise. It needs truth. She never chased trends or tried to please everyone. She did the work, trusted the work, and let time do the rest. That's rare now, in a world where fame fades fast and everyone's trying to stay visible. Maggie didn't need to shout to be seen, she whispered, and the world leaned in. And maybe that's why her passing stirred such emotion. It wasn't just grief, it was gratitude. People realized how much she'd shaped their sense of storytelling without them even noticing. You could feel her fingerprints across generations, from the strict but loving teachers we grew up with, to the witty grandmothers who knew exactly what to say. Her characters became a kind of mirror for our own lives. When McGonagall stood firm against chaos, we saw the teachers who held classrooms together. When Violet Crawley threw her barbed yet loving lines across that long dining table, we saw our own elders, sharp, proud, refusing to fade quietly. She gave dignity to age, humor to sadness, and meaning to the idea of endurance. That's something worth holding on to. From a storyteller's point of view, what's most powerful about Maggie is how she made stillness dramatic. Every new actor wants to do more, but she understood that sometimes the bravest thing is to do less. To trust the pause. To let the truth breathe. You can see it in her face during The Lady in the Van. The way a single twitch around her eyes tells an entire story. That's mastery. And in a way, it reflects the same philosophy this channel tries to live by: slowing down, looking closer, finding the emotion hiding under the surface. Maggie's work reminds us that storytelling isn't about spectacle, it's about sincerity. There's a quiet lesson in the way she lived too. She kept her life small, so her art could be big. She guarded her privacy fiercely, not because she was cold, but because she knew that mystery is sacred in a world that demands constant sharing. She chose silence, and that silence spoke volumes. It made people listen harder, respect her more. She didn't confuse visibility with value, something we could all remember. It's easy to think that success means exposure, but Maggie showed that longevity comes from integrity. And for everyone who's ever struggled to find their place, she left a kind of blueprint. Stay true to what you do, protect what matters, don't rush the journey. She taught us that it's okay to be selective, to hold yourself to a higher standard, even if it makes you different, because being different is how you last. You can trace that lesson across her career, from the tiny Oxford stage to the global spotlight. Every step was earned. Every word was meant. So, as we look back now, this isn't just a farewell to a great performer. It's a reflection on what she stood for: precision, humility, longevity, and a kind of quiet rebellion against the noise. And if you've ever been moved by her words, or found a little strength in one of her characters, then you're part of her legacy too. That's the beauty of stories: they don't end when the credits roll. They stay, gently shaping the way we see the world. And if this moment means something to you, if Maggie's voice ever reminded you that kindness and strength can live in the same breath, then maybe share that thought below, or just keep her memory close. Because stories like hers aren't meant to fade, they're meant to be passed on. There's a certain silence that follows when someone like Maggie Smith leaves. Not the kind that feels empty, but the kind that hums quietly, like a memory refusing to go away. You feel it when her scenes flicker across the screen, that unmistakable presence, the tilt of her head, the arch of an eyebrow, the kind of control that made every word land with weight. It's strange how even now, you can almost hear her voice echo through lines you know by heart. Maybe that's what true legacy sounds like: not applause, but resonance. She didn't just leave performances behind. She left feelings, fragments of truth, tucked into 100 stories that keep finding their way back to us. And maybe that's the point of all this. We don't mourn legends like Maggie Smith because they disappear. We remember them because they never really do. Every young actor stepping onto a stage with trembling hands carries a piece of her courage. Every audience member holding their breath through a quiet scene feels her precision living on. She's become part of the fabric of storytelling itself, woven so deeply into what we love about British cinema and theater that you can't pull one thread without finding her name attached. When people look back in years to come, they'll still talk about Downton Abbey and Harry Potter, but they'll also talk about the craft, about how she showed the world that subtlety is power, that stillness can roar, that elegance can be stronger than spectacle. Her work wasn't loud, but it lingers like perfume in an old theater seat, faint, enduring, unforgettable. And maybe that's how we should leave this story quietly, with gratitude. Because Maggie Smith didn't ask to be celebrated. She asked only to do the work right. And she did, again and again, until the lights dimmed and the curtain fell. What remains isn't sadness, it's admiration. It's the simple truth that somewhere, in the flicker of a scene or a whispered line, she's still there guiding, teaching, reminding us that art, when done with honesty, never really ends.